Saturday, the Ohio State Buckeyes are heading to South Bend to take on the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame in primetime. Also worth noting, Barry, your undefeated Terps take on Michigan State in your favorite spot, East Lansing. That's at 3:30 on NBC and Peacock. Also, while we're on break, David Montgomery, we sit here and tape on Friday, not practicing. OBJ and Justice Hill also not practicing for the Ravens. So get your Craig Reynolds and Gus Bus lineups fired away. All right, it's What's on Tap, Bud Light What's on Tap, the official beer sponsor of the NFL at the Bud Light bar here on the happy hour. As we look at the matchups with the highest point totals of the week here, Jay, we are going to start with the Chargers traveling to Minnesota to play the Vikings. This over-under is at 54. I believe that might be one of the highest, if not the highest, we've had of the entire season right now. So let's start with the Chargers here. How about a confidence level check in Josh Kelly? After a little bit of a disappointment last week, and yes, he ran into a buzzsaw. No Austin Eckler, though, so we know the volume will be there for Josh Kelly.
Yeah, certainly a lot higher confidence level than last week going up against the Titans. This Vikings run defense against Philadelphia looked like the 22 Houston Texans, Connor. So I think that Josh Kelly, I would be firing him up in almost every league, just given that the total is 6 points higher than any other game on the board and the favorable matchup against the Vikings defense. Barry,
staying with this offense on the Chargers, quiet start for Quentin Johnson, their first-round pick at wide receiver. He's only played fewer than 30% of their snaps in both their games this season. Is Quentin Johnson still a guy you're interested in stashing on a fantasy roster?
Listen, it's an explosive offense, and the minute something happens to Keenan Allen or Mike Williams or even Josh Palmer, we could see Johnson get more on the field. I don't mind dropping him right now if you have a need. I wouldn't drop him just to drop him, but if you have a need, I don't mind it because I don't think anyone's picking him up anytime soon. So if you start seeing his route participation, you start seeing some targets increase, maybe he's playing more snaps, then you can maybe pick him up and stash him because we have seen a lot of rookies start slow, not do anything, and then second half of the year, his rookie wide receivers especially, really, kind of go off. But it doesn't look like that's in the cards anytime soon for Quentin Johnson, given how well the Chargers skill players are playing. That's not really a chance for him to get on the field. So I don't mind dropping him. I wouldn't drop him just to drop him, but again, if there's somebody better, like I would tell you this, I would drop him for Jonathan Mingo, just to give you an example of somebody that's probably also out there in your league.
Jay, when you look at the struggles of this Chargers defense, and it's been really, really rough for Brandon Staley, but the confidence in Justin Herbert, does that give you some optimism for later on for Quentin Johnson at least?
I mean, I think you look at him, it's not quite the same thing, but you look at him the same way you look at like Tajay Spears or Tank Bigsby. Like it's looking like he's only going to provide value if a Chargers wide receiver goes down. And even then, there's no guarantee. Like we know Tajay Spears would become a huge fantasy weapon if Derrick Henry was out. We don't necessarily know that about Quentin Johnson, but at least there is upside there. And look, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, they do tend to get hurt. So there is a chance that he provides value. But yeah, I wouldn't be hanging on to him if there are better options on the waiver wire.
On the Minnesota side of things in this game, different story for their first-round rookie wide receiver. They've leaned on Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison averaging over 16 points in fantasy through the first 2 weeks. He's been helped by simply getting in the end zone both weeks, Jay. When you look at Addison right now, is he kind of deemed himself as an every-week starter in fantasy because the volume of this passing offense is very, very high? It helps that they have talent under center and at wide receiver, but also this is another defense that feels like they put their offense playing behind constantly.
Yeah, definitely. And look, Kirk Cousins is the favorite on DraftKings to lead the league in passing yards. And so I think that he is perfectly able to support 3 different receiving options. And that's obviously Justin Jefferson, it's obviously TJ Hawkinson, and then I think it's Jordan Addison as well. And look, his first 2 weeks, it's been a little bit fluky because he hasn't had a ton of targets and he's been dependent on these bomb touchdown throws. But at the same time, I think that is mitigated by the fact that he's a rookie. He's played 2 games. He's going to grow into the season more and more. And this team projects to throw as much as any in the competition.
Barry, where does Addison rank for you coming into week 3 after an impressive start for the rookie wide receiver?
Yeah, I'm at wide receiver 34, and I certainly could be too low. The touchdowns are, somewhat unexpected. You don't expect them to score one every single day. But to your point about them getting more confidence in Jordan Addison, 56% of the snaps in week 1, 71% in week 2. It is a team that's going to throw quite a bit. His production is coming, I think, at the expense of KJ Osborne. I agree with Jay There are 3 fantasy relevant pass catchers on this team. It's clearly Jefferson and Hawkinson. That's one of the reasons why I'm down on Osborne this week. He's my wide receiver 48. But again, 76% of Jordan Addison's total yards have come on touchdowns. Of his receiving yards have come on touchdowns on those long, deep plays. But you know what? That's part of his game. They are going to take shots. This is a defense that gives up big plays. It's worth noting that no team in the NFL has given up more deep receptions this year than the Los Angeles Chargers. You can throw deep on them. We saw what the Dolphins did to them in Week 1. We've seen even the Titans, the high-flying Titans of all people. The Titans were able to move the ball effectively. We saw Treylon Burks catch a long one against them. I do think Jordan Addison is a high variance but upside wide receiver 3 play this week.
Connor, where do you have Addison ranked among your wide receivers in the draft?
Wide receiver 2, only behind JSN. I was actually a little higher on him than I feel like a lot of people. I thought he was a clear first-round player. I didn't care about the size. It's also an amazing landing spot. If you're a draft analyst, you love when this happens because, as Barry hinted, this is a team that throws the ball. They like to live in 11 personnel, and that's why we brought up KJ Osborne. He still played 93% of the snaps. The wide receivers live on the field. They understand how to get them in space. Addison's for real. He's going to be a consistent fantasy threat, especially in PPR, because the targets are there. As much as we love to pepper Justin Jefferson with as much volume as possible, you have to have somebody else. That's why they had Adam Thielen succeed for so long. I think the ceiling of Addison in this offense is much higher than what we saw from Thielen last year.
Yep, and we're going to see games like last season when the Vikings played the Patriots, and Bill Belichick's like, I'm just going to bracket Justin Jefferson. Now, he still had a massive game anyway because he's Justin Jefferson, but I think there will just be games where teams just say, Justin Jefferson cannot beat us, and it's going to be Addison and Hawkinson who get more of the targets.
That's exactly right. Okay, with that, let's move over to our next high total here, and that is the Broncos traveling to Miami. Miami favored by 6.5 points. The over-under in this game is set at 48, which might seem like a little bit of a surprise considering how the Broncos offense has been under Russell Wilson over the last year. But when you look at what the Dolphins are doing on offense, Jay, that's why these totals are going to be this high this week, because they can carry it on their own. Let's start with the problem of this game, though. That would be the Broncos. Is there, some attraction to using Russell Wilson as a streamer this week? We have a lot of quarterback injuries. Russ hasn't been bad under Sean Payton. I know we want more from him, but is he a streaming option?
I think so. I think Russell Wilson's been fine. He looks better than he did last season. He doesn't look like Seattle MVP candidate Russell Wilson, but he is airing it out. He's using his legs a little bit. And look, I think he's in that group with Jared Goff and Brock Purdy and Geno Smith and these type of guys who are perfectly viable if the matchup is attractive.
That's right. Okay. Barry, when you look at the Broncos offense, anything else that interests you from a fantasy perspective right now? We've seen Russ. He's been better since they moved on from Nathaniel Hackett last year. He still hasn't played like peak Russ, but he's been better. Does that help anyone else out in this Broncos offense?
Yeah, I think you obviously Sutton and Judy, we're waiting to see them really kind of emerge here. It'll be interesting to see on Sunday. Did Marvin Mims earn more targets? Right now, they're not committing to that. But, he only got I think he only played 5 snaps or 6 snaps, but obviously made the most of them. So we'd love to see Marvin Mims get more run. I have Javonte Williams as a top 20 fantasy running back this week. So, look, it's a high-scoring game, and I always like to use high-scoring games in this as kind of a tiebreaker. So depending on who else you have on your team, if you've got Cortland Sutton and you've got Jerry Jeudy and you're thinking about using them versus somebody else, I use it as a tiebreaker. Yeah, give me the guy in the higher scoring game. I don't know why iPad's going up and down, by the way, just noticing that. I'm trying to sit still. I can't get off the camera thing that I don't know, it's a whole thing on my iPad, but that I'm doing here. But yeah, I think it's sort of, as always, check my rankings. Tune into Fantasy Football pregame Sunday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern, right here on Peacock, and we'll get you set for it. But do I think to Jay's point, do I think Russell Wilson is playing better and confident enough to keep fantasy relevant players afloat? I do. Obviously, his score last week was inflated by the Hail Mary, which you can't expect to repeat. But I have him as a top 12 guy. I'm on my others receiving votes love list this week because he's running more, to Jay's point, 56 rushing yards last week. And this should be a high-scoring game where he's going to have to throw to keep up.
Yep, and Terrence Malick's Tree of Life got pretty weird around the 39-minute mark as well, so it would make sense that Matthew's iPad goes off the rails given his current setting.
Let's dive into
Thank you.
let's dive into what everybody's really tuning in for in this game, and that's the Miami offense. Now, Barry, the thing is with this Miami offense, we know how great Tyreek is. We know what Tua can do under Mike McDaniel, but there might be no Jalen Waddle in this game as he's still not practicing due to the concussion. What does that do for the other Miami pass catchers in McDaniel's offense?
I think it elevates them. I don't know that it elevates them enough to you feel like, oh, these guys are absolutely must starts. I think, but if you're in a super deep league, if you're truly desperate, if you're playing DFS and you're looking for a cheap option, Braxton Berrios, who's played 43% of the snaps, has an 11% target share so far this year. He's kind of interesting. River Craycraft, 35% of the snaps, a 10% target share. Berrios to me is the more interesting one just because I feel like he's just been around a little bit longer, right? He's got a little bit more experience in this offense with Mike McDaniel, and so and just more experience in the NFL. So, and he's got a slightly higher target share and snap rate. So Berrios over Craycraft for me, but maybe some Durham Smythe as well. You know, they mix and match. It's hard to say that you'd feel great about starting any of them because neither of them are, quote, Jalen Waddle. But again, if you're desperate, why not target somebody that's in a high-flying offense that's going to be in a high-scoring game?
Yeah. I think we've said the words Durham Smythe every show for the past 3 weeks, so it's good to keep the streak alive.
Yeah.
In terms of
hopefully
Tua,
he'll earn some of it. Hopefully he'll earn some of it.
Yeah, indeed.
We
River
mentioned that he
Craycraft.
hasn't learned it yet.
River Craycraft also developing his own streak. Look, with Jalen Waddle, I mean, the main beneficiary, honestly, is probably just going to be Tyreek Hill. And if you're any concern about Tua, I wouldn't, so long as Tyreek Hill and Mike McDaniel are still there. I'm fine starting Tua. He's just must start every single week in this offense. And also a sneaky thing is that it looks like Teron Armstead is going to play. He's getting in limited practices. The buzz from Mike McDaniel was that he was probably okay to play on Sunday night against the Patriots. They were just being conservative, and he wanted to play, so I suspect he's going to be out there, and this offense could look even better with him back.
Jay, let's stick with Tua right now. What does he have to do to not gain ground, because it's dead even and it's going to take a lot, but to really start to separate himself in this MVP conversation, especially when you're dealing with Patrick Mahomes, who's always going to get the benefit of the doubt?
Look, I think team success is such a big part of MVP, and if the Dolphins, if they get the 1 seed and Tua keeps up with, these leaguing efficiency stats, then I think that he's going to be someone who can win MVP because he was a candidate last year, which I think people forget because of how his season ended. But, he was right there behind Mahomes and Jalen Hurts, and he's someone who, he just looks better than he did last year as well. Like, I think back to the Chargers game he played last year, he was terrible, and then he just absolutely eviscerated them in week 1. He's just making better decisions. He's second year in the offense. I think we just have to treat him like a top 5, top 7 quarterback going forward.
All right, let's get into our last game here. Also, another point total set at 48. It is the Bears traveling to Kansas City. The Chiefs, not a huge surprise. They're favored by 12.5 points. It has been some kind of week for the Chicago Bears. And as we've said on this show, they're either going to respond to all of that and make this interesting, or this could be the beginning of the end of their absolute season. So, Barry, we will start with the Bears. Is DJ Moore a sell high after last week, or are you still optimistic about him going forward?
Yeah, I'm still optimistic about him going forward, and I also don't think you can, quote, sell high, because I don't think his value is all that high. Again, with all the drama going on around Chicago in the passing game, you don't feel great about DJ Moore. So I'm hanging tough on him because I think the upside of DJ Moore, being a number 1 wide receiver for an offense that we hope gets a lot better, and just knowing his skill set and how he's been able to produce with bad quarterbacks throughout his career, I think the upside there is much greater than whatever you'll get on the trade market for DJ Moore right now. So I would hang tough with DJ Moore. And you're starting him against the Chiefs. It's worth noting that Kansas City has allowed the 5th most targets to wide receivers through 2 games. So, again, as 12.5-point dogs, the Bears should be throwing early and often against KC.
Yeah, we'll see what kind of adjustments this offense makes after Luke Getsy's kind of been under fire, even maybe by his own quarterback, although those comments were clarified. And listen, it was kind of interesting, too. We had a clip, Devin White saying to DJ Moore, they ain't using you right. So as you see it right here, in a mic'd up situation it was on the Bucs side of things, but even other players around the league, Jay, are noticing some of the dysfunction of the Bears offense right now.
It's so crazy that this got out in the first place. I can't
Yes,
believe
that's
it.
question
This
number
is a very
one.
strange release from the Bucs. I love it. Look, I think your optimism around the Bears offense in just all phases, it just comes back to, do you believe in Justin Fields as a passer? Because we know what he can do on the ground. It's just a question of whether he's getting designed runs called. But, I mean, Connor, you watched a lot of his college tape, obviously, and you've seen him in the pros. Do you think there's much more there as a passer, or is this just who Fields is in year 3?
He's just hesitating, and he's playing slow. That's what it comes down to. And it's not just the passing. He's been a guy that it takes a little while to load up and get the ball out, but he has such a powerful arm, and he had a really accurate an arm in college that you thought he can get away with it behind a good offensive line. He hasn't been behind a good offensive line. I think the lack of running this year is a massive disappointment from Justin Fields, because you know you're going to be under pressure. They're not designing runs for him. He's also not scrambling a lot. He's taking way too long to make that decision to scramble. And clearly there's some dysfunction of the actual calls in this offense, whether it's lack of creativity. I know they ran that exact screen back-to-back plays. It seems very obvious. And, you know, I'll kind of send this back to you, Barry. The Bears have a lot of dysfunction throwing the ball right now from what they're getting under center. Does that give you any hope of the future for handing the ball, as Roschon Johnson's ascent has kind of begun and fantasy managers are taking notice?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think we have to all be excited about Roschon Johnson, because backup running backs, generally speaking, have two paths to fantasy success. Number one is the person in front of them gets hurt, or for whatever reason, there's suddenly an opportunity to start. The other way is just that they turn out to be better, and they actually win the job. And so Roschon Johnson, who started the season 4th on the depth chart, we talked about this early in the preseason on this show, where it was just like, well, you've got Khalil Herbert, you've got Deontay Foreman, they've got Travis Homer, who's good on third down and is going to play some special teams. So Roschon Johnson's actually 4th on the depth chart. Well, we're already 2 weeks in the season, and Roschon Johnson basically splitting touches with Khalil Herbert. Deontay Foreman was a healthy scratch last week as well. And so obviously, if anything were to happen to Herbert, it would be Roschon Johnson. But the fact of the matter is Roschon Johnson just might honestly be better than Khalil Herbert and win this job outright on pure talent. And so as a result, I think Roschon Johnson is an interesting guy this week, but certainly somebody that needs to be rostered in a lot more leagues, because I do think as the season goes on, they're going to lean on Johnson more and more.
Jay, let's jump into the Kansas City side here. And figuring out this wide receiver group has not only been tough for the Chiefs, it's been tough for everybody in fantasy as well. And you have Kadarius Toney there, who did not practice on Wednesday and Thursday. He's now dealing with a toe issue. It feels like, unfortunately, it's always something with Kadarius Toney. Sky Moore has not gotten off to the start that we all hope for, although there's some optimism in recent weeks or in recent days. Is there any Chiefs wide receiver that you feel okay starting at this point?
Not that I feel great about. I think Justin Watson is the best receiver on that team at the moment, which is crazy given that this team is literally the favorite to win the Super Bowl with Justin Watson as wide receiver 1. Look, it's Kelsey, it's Mahomes, it's Pacheco, and then after that, it's a little bit grim. I do think the offense just overall, Connor, will look better now that Kelsey is healthier. He wasn't 100% last week. He was not right. And the fact that, he should be better for the run, I think that will help the whole offense. The most interesting guy to me is still Sky Moore, and just seeing if he has any upside. He caught the bomb last week, but still he's not really getting the targets. I just think this is going to be an egalitarian offense, and it's just going to be Mahomes, Kelsey, and then Pacheco.
I think what's frustrating with Moore is he's getting the snaps and he's getting the routes. Besides MVS, he's the guy that's out there.
Yep.
But we always say it's a lot of cardio because he only has a 9.1% target share. So he's out there, but he just hasn't been overly effective and not in sync with Patrick Mahomes. Barry, how do you rank these guys coming into week 3?
So a bunch of different things. First off, I would love Justin Watson to become a thing. I'm with you, Jay. I don't get why this guy doesn't get more run. I have him in a deep dynasty league. By the way, a deep dynasty league that lost Cooper Kupp and Austin Eckler, didn't have Travis Kelsey in week 1. I need Justin Watson to be a thing. And I lost Brandon Cooks. Like, it's 12-team, 33-man rosters. Like, it's super crazy deep. Anyone with a pulse is viable in that league. I just traded for Cedric Tillman this morning, actually. Connor, I know you like him quite a bit as right. Yeah. So anyway, but the fact is that, so I wish Justin Watson would become a thing, but so far he just hasn't been. He's been there for a while, so I don't know what it is, whether they just don't feel comfortable with him and they think he has to have a narrow route tree, or he's just a deep threat. I don't know what it is. I have Kadarius Toney ranked the highest of any of the Chiefs wide receivers. He leads the Chiefs in target share. Now, it's 13%. To your point, earlier, Connor, you're just saying Sky Moore only has a 9% target share. Kadarius Toney leads Chiefs wide receivers with a 13% target share, which just sort of tells you just how much they spread it around. But I guess if I have to pick someone, and again, Kadarius Toney is my highest ranked Chiefs wide receiver, and he's wide receiver 51. So it's just like, but Kadarius Toney, again, I feel like after week one, they went to him a lot in week one. He made a bunch of bad drops. They went back to him in week two. The Bears have been a bottom 6 pass defense through the first 2 weeks. They're 12.5-point favorites. I do think I know they really like Kadarius Toney there, and they want to get him going. So it feels like they might have a package for him. I have Sky Moore at 56. Again, it's just who scores the touchdown? We just don't know. That's the problem, is because Mahomes is just so talented, and they just have so many guys that they scheme up, and it really feels like Kelsey, Pacheco, and Mahomes are the only ones that you feel good about any given week for the Chiefs. Otherwise, it's just throwing a dart and hoping for a touchdown.
Jay, I'll close on this topic. This line is set at 48. We obviously, during What's on Tap by Bud Light, we always go through the high totals. Am I crazy for thinking this line might be fool's gold? I mean, Kansas City's offense hasn't been what we're accustomed to seeing. They're still figuring it out. The Bears' offense is dysfunction with a capital D right now. Is this a little high to you, or are we buying in on maybe some garbage time offense here as well?
Well, I think the thing is that after everything that's happened to the Bears, a lot of people have texted me saying like, "Oh, the Bears are going to bounce back with all the dysfunction." Like, the issue is that their players are just a lot worse than Kansas City's. It doesn't matter how motivated they are to play well. I think it's going to be ugly for Chicago. And Mahomes with Kelsey another week, right? I think this offense will look better, Connor.
All right, with that, we're taking our last break. When we're back, it's last call. We're sending Matthew Berry our pickup lines. Who's he going to roll with this week? Right after this.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com. And I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched. Or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.